This morning we're looking at the story of Jesus walking on water. And quite honestly, even if you are not a Christian, if you don't read the Bible, if you haven't been to church in a very, very long time, if ever, you know the story of Jesus walking on water. It's part of our cultural story. We tell it in a lot of places. And water is profound. It's both life giving and death dealing. For the majority of human history, humans haven't known how to swim. So if they were in a boat and fell out, that was it. You had to depend on help from your friends, if that was even possible, or just accept the fact that you were going under and you were going to come back up on top after a little while. Many children died along the edges of rivers and waterways because they didn't know how to protect themselves. This idea that swimming is for recreation, that's actually a kind of a modern concept, very, very modern. That wasn't the world of the disciples. The water was both the source of income, but it was also a very, very scary place to be. And that's the world that we come into this morning when we look at the scriptures and Jesus walking on water. So we have Jesus finally getting up into the mountains. Remember, he's been trying for the last little while, but the crowds keep following him. Finally, he's fed everybody, they've gone home, it's done. He sends the disciples off into boats on the water in the seas of Galilee, and he finally gets up into the hills where he can be and pray. He can mourn John the Baptist. He can think about what's next. He can contemplate what he has to do. All of this stuff finally is something he's able to have time to indulge in, time to engage in prayer. And then the next morning he comes down. We're talking about the morning, we're talking dawn. It was common, it was the thing to do for fisher folk to go out into the water at night. Remember, a good third, anyway, of Jesus' followers were fishermen. They knew how the water worked. They knew how to work a boat. They knew how to do what needed to be done in order to try to stay safe on the water. But that night, the storm came up. And if you ever see any pictures of the Sea of Galilee, there's mountains on the side and the wind comes down through. It's a vicious gale, and it's well known to capsize boats and strike terror. And it just pops up and goes away. There's no warning. It definitely wouldn't have been any warning 2,000 years ago. So they're on sea and it's stormy and they're trying to keep the boat afloat. And we're not talking yachts, we're talking dories and dinghies. So not big boats at all. Trying to stay afloat, desperate, scared. And in the wee hours of the morning, pre-dawn hours, Jesus comes down and looks out at them. And they see him. And they want to be saved. They want to be rescued because they, at that point in time, believe Jesus is capable of doing just about anything. And Jesus walks out on the water to them, and they are just stunned, completely bowled over that he's able to do this. And Peter, of course, wants to do it too. So Jesus encourages him to come out of the boat. And he does take a few steps. And then we have that Wile E. Coyote moment where he realizes that he's on water and he sinks. And Jesus rescues him and puts him back in the boat. And they're all stunned. They're all amazed and say, this really is the Son of God. There's so much ink spilled over the story, but there's something that I want to tear apart this morning is this Jesus as supernatural. When we encounter anybody who's anti-Christian, anti-religion, one of the things they're always, always focused on is the supernatural of God. If God is so great, why doesn't God start famines? If God is so great, why are there wars? If God is so great, make this table fly, make water into wine, make all of these miraculous things happen. We don't go away from it as people of faith. We fall right into it. We love these stories. I mean, when I opened, I said, people know these stories, even Jesus walking on water, if they haven't been to church. It's because we tell them, because we're astounded by that. Jesus, just before this story, fed 5,000 men plus women and children. And he got the disciples to do this. Now, the only thing about that story that really astounds us is the number, because Jesus was always feeding people. But we're amazed there was 5,000 people. How incredible is that? We fall into the trap of wanting the supernatural, of wanting the proof, of wanting the parlor tricks. We want Jesus to do great things in our world. And people are convinced that if Jesus doesn't do what they ask, then Jesus doesn't exist, then God doesn't exist. And it's a way of justifying, again, this personal relationship version of Christianity, this God is so powerful, God can do all sorts of things. It always misses the mark. Jesus never was about miracles and big things. We told the stories of miracles. We identified 5,000. We identified the walk on water. Jesus was just doing his thing, feeding people, taking care of people, trying to get his disciples to get on board. And even they, when they see the miracle, then they're able to say, wow, this is really the Son of God. But what about the time when he's sitting quietly talking to people? They kind of push Jesus along. Like, come on, get along. This isn't what we're about. We want the big show. We don't want the quiet moments. We've lost the element that reminds us that Christianity is a lifestyle. It's a way of being in the world. It isn't going out there and professing that our God is so big that God can take on anybody else, even this mythological creature known as the devil. That's not our faith. That's not what Jesus wanted to do. Jesus was fully comfortable within his tradition. He just saw it needing to be reformed. And the way it needed to be reformed was by people caring about other people, about people giving that agape love, that communal love, that take care of each other love that Jesus demonstrated. That's what he was about. And he knew the government was going to be against it because it's so much easier to govern people when you put dividing lines between us and create an us and the they. Politicians have been doing it for thousands of years. It's not just something that happens in modernity. Jesus knew what he had to teach, what he had to show people would upend completely that particular apple cart. He tried to teach the disciples, and occasionally they got it. Mostly they didn't. He tried to teach the people around him. Sometimes they got it. Other times they were waiting for the miracles. They were waiting for the big show. They were waiting for the walk on water moments. We do Jesus a disservice when that's what we pay attention to. It's a great story, but there's a lot of great stories, including great stories of helping people, of being there for people. By focusing on the supernatural, we take away from the human. Remember, Jesus is fully divine and fully human. Not partially, not conveniently, not pick and choose, but fully human. And it's that humanness of Jesus that gives us the model for how we're supposed to behave. And it's the humanness of Jesus that touched the humanness of us to show us that we were completely capable. See, the thing with only looking for a supernatural God is that they are removed. They are the sole actors in history. They are the ones who will make or break a society. It removes the responsibility from us. And that is the exact opposite of what we should be doing. Jesus walked on water, great. But he spent alone time with God. That's so much more profound. He cared about the people around him. Absolutely something we can do. Do not get distracted by the big wow, by the carnival show, because that was never the faith. That was never the lifestyle Jesus wanted us to live. And we have to work very hard to kind of push that aside. Those are stories. They're fun. They're interesting. They certainly can bring us to openness to God. If God can do great things with Jesus, God can certainly do great things with us. But we should not think that's the beginning and the end of our faith, because it's such a small little piece of what we're actually to be about. Christianity is a lifestyle, and that lifestyle is something we can all participate in. We can all do. We don't need to wait for God to put on a show.